Are you the personality type you think you are? You're going along, strolling through life, thinking you're one type, but in reality, you're a completely different type. In this video, we're gonna talk about what types most frequently mistype as other types. Meaning, based on my observations, what I've seen around the block, when people are one type, what do they often type themselves as? Is it the same thing? Is it a different type? For a lot of people who take the test without knowing nothing, they actually probably have a better chance of getting something close to the correct type rather than people who know a little bit, people who know just enough to get them into trouble, people whose minds have been poisoned by the biases of typology. The other thing is, I think certain personality types are more likely to get interested in typology than others, and those are the more likely to get a little messed up. Whereas the types that are less interested in typology in general, they don't care what it's all about. They, I think, will test more accurately. But you know what? To be honest with you, I don't think that it matters that much. So don't get that worked up. Don't get that worried. So what causes mistyping? I think the first biggest thing is when people take tests and the questions on the test are like very unclear and too easily misinterpreted. Depending on if this video gets released before this one or not, check out the card above my head where I take the 16 personalities test and I manipulate it and I point out all the problems with all the answers and act like a smarty pants the whole time. So, you know, a test question might say something like, do you often enjoy making to-do lists when you're at home? Like, I can't even, I could look at that many ways. Maybe I don't enjoy it, but maybe I do it every day. Maybe I only do it every once in a while, but I really like it when I do it. How am I supposed to interpret this? How am I supposed to answer this? So yeah, tests, yeah, not doing us a favor. The next two things, the reasons why people mistype, are the big ones that are in our control and the things that are a bit more embarrassing. First is when we answer the questions on the test, a lot of us want to give socially desirable answers. Depending on, you know, how old we are, where we grew up, etc., what our friends think, we might answer questions in a certain way even if they are not really true. So for example, on a test you might get a question like, do you enjoy discussing philosophical theories? And a lot of people will say yes, because it's like you want to appear smart and erudite, especially if you are someone who is like maybe a college student. You don't want to answer no because you're worried it'll make you look stupid. And of course, that's just another question that's not very good. And then lastly, but not leastly, and this is perhaps the most embarrassing one, is when we have a lack of self-awareness, when we think we are one way, but we are actually the other way. And this is where a lot of people actually get seen for their mistyping, because they are clearly one way, but they think they are another way. They are clearly, for example, a very feely person, but they think they're very logical and a thinker. And everyone else is like, well, clearly you make all of your decisions based on irrational emotions and stuff, but okay, you can think of yourself as a thinker. That's fine. Let me clear up my language a bit here, because we all are thinkers, we all are feelers. I'm really talking about what you prefer to do, and that can get tricky because we all have both sides. We all have a logical and an emotional side. We use both, and so when it comes time to like really judge which do I prefer, that can be tricky. You can check out my video here. What is the shadow of each of the 16 personalities? That talks a bit about this, how we're not aware of certain parts of our personality even though we're doing it. So the first biggest mistype, I think, which you'll hear everywhere, and this is probably not a surprise to anyone, but I think most people, especially taking the 16personalities.com test, type as INFJ, and that is because of the way the test is constructed, and also because I think those are the most socially desirable answers with that test. So in a way, it's like if you answered the questions correctly on that test, you will get at least INF or at least NF. And especially N. I think on that test, it's very heavily weighted towards intuition. You've answered the questions wrong if you didn't get intuition on that test. Does this mean that everyone who says they're INFJ because they took a test is wrong? No, it just means that a lot of people are. But again, wrong, right? I don't really care. I'm not calling people out here. This is just to show you how tests are unreliable and how we are less focused inward on ourselves and what we're actually like and more focused on how do I project a good image. Interestingly, I was in a documentary this past year called Persona. It's on HBO Max, where they delve into this, how people take these personality tests for jobs. And a lot of people train in order to answer the test correctly. They're not really telling the truth about themselves, they're just answering in a desirable way. And even in a personality test for fun that we do at home by ourselves, I think a lot of times we answer what we think other people will want to see. So ultimately, any type can mistype as any other type, but I have seen a bit of clustering depending on what type the person actually is. Let's stop momentarily and see if YouTube would like to show a commercial. Thanks for sitting through that. And if you're enjoying this video, hit the Let's go through the specific types, and I think a general pattern you will see is they usually get something backwards, something mixed up, if not the whole thing. ESTJs, ENTJs. I have seen people who are ENTJ who type themselves as ENFJ. I've seen them type themselves as INTP. ESTJs, I think, might be more likely to type themselves correctly because I think that that's a type that is less likely to actually care about typology, and they're just like, whatever, just give me my result, let's move on. But yeah, for those ENTJs, a lot of times they'll see themselves as more introverted than they really are, which is true for a lot of the EJs. A lot of the extroverts in general think that they are introverts, probably because they're so active going out there talking to everyone that they're like, I am so drained. But some of them are very aware that, especially the EJs, are very aware that they are extroverts, but they are, the ENTJ in particular is more aware of their feeling side. It's introverted feeling, and it's their inferior function. It's something they don't bring out often, but it's something they're aware of, which can cause them to not realize it and think of themselves as feelers. For ESFJ and ENFJ, much like with the ENTJ, I think the ENFJ will often type themselves as like INFPs. They think of themselves as being pretty introverted. ESFJs will often type themselves as ENFJs or just type themselves correctly. Maybe there's something about introverted sensing, which the SJ types have, that leads them to be just kind of straightforward and be like, well, this is factual, this is how I am, which can lead them to a correct answer. I'm not sure. That's total conjecture right there. Sometimes you also see them type themselves as ENFPs because they think of themselves as being so free-flowing and so easygoing and freewheeling. That's what I was trying to say. They don't realize that they are constantly, you know, taking everyone by the shoulders and shaking them and being like, are you okay? Are you okay? Which is kind of the thing that the ENFJs do. If we move to the ESTP and ESFP, what I've seen a lot is ESFPs get themselves upside down and think they're INTJs. I've seen it happen enough times where it's just like something I expect. Maybe it's because ESFPs are so aware of what is cool, what they like, and they like INTJs and they think INTJs are cool. So that's what they identify as. ESTPs, on the other hand, I don't think they really are into typology very much, so I would guess that they probably would just answer the test and either get it right or get some random answer and be like, I don't care. I suppose it's possible they could also type themselves upside down as INFJs. Yeah, that's entirely possible. ENFP and ENTP, this is an interesting one. I think these types, oftentimes I have found, type themselves as introverts, usually as IPs. I think they often realize, the EPs, they realize that they're P-types. They're like, I've got all this chaotic energy, I can't deny it. I'm so excited, I just can't hide it. So they're like, okay, I'm a P-type, but I'm an introvert. Okay, you see the ENFPs type as INFPs. You see the ENTPs type as INTPs. You also, I think, get both of these typing themselves as INFJ, which you can't really blame them for doing. I mean, the ENFP is an NF type and has dominant intuition the same way that an INFJ has. So it's a reasonable thing to conclude. You get the NF right. It's also very reasonable for an ENTP to type themselves as an INFJ because they have extroverted feeling like an INFJ does, and they have the dominant intuition. So it's not that far off. Then let's move to ISFJ, ISTJ. These two types, you know, are kind of, it's weird. They're supposedly some of the most common types of all the 16 personalities. Let me know in the comments, by the way, if you'd like me to do a video about how common or rare is each type. Is that more a statistical kind of video interesting to you, or should I just not worry about it? But even though these types are supposedly the most common, they don't really show up a ton in typology discussions. They don't seem to be very attracted to that. And as I said earlier, maybe there's something about introverted sensing, which they have, the ISTJ and ISFJ have as their dominant function. Maybe there's something about that that just makes them so rooted in reality that they either don't care about Myers-Briggs, or when they do take the test, they're just like putting the facts on the table and getting the right answer. However, I think a lot of times I see people who type themselves as INFJ or INTJ who are actually ISFJ or ISTJ, which it's not that far off. I think part of it is just that intuition in general, especially introverted intuition, is difficult to understand abstractly. And if you are a sensing type where you spend most of your time paying attention to reality and not the abstract, it becomes even more of a conundrum. And so I think that is perhaps why these types can type themselves as intuitives. But like I said, every type has everything. So yes, an ISFJ is intuitive. They have intuition. They just prefer to use their sensing. Next, we go to INFJ, INTJ. I think INTJs a lot of times get it right. I think they're just kind of smart and they realize, yeah, this is my type. Occasionally you get INTJs who do what the ESFPs do and they type themselves backwards as ESFPs. And maybe that's just because they want to be cool. INFJs, if they mistype themselves, often think they are ENFJs. They think that they are, I'm just so extroverted, you know, because there are some INFJs who are more on the extroverted side. You can check out this video above my head about the 3 subtypes of INFJs. I talk about all that. However, since most people think they're INFJs anyway, I would say probably most INFJs do not mistype themselves. Just, if we're just talking statistically here, we're talking probability, probably no worries there. But how would you know, I guess? Moving on to the IP types, I gotta tell you, I think the IP types, especially once they start to learn about typology, are the most likely to get their type right. Except for what I just said about the INFJ, just being like blindly getting it right. Because IP types are very much aware of themselves. Like, that is their whole thing. That's the defining thing of their personality, is their identity. So they really know themselves very well. So they're not gonna really trip themselves up too much. With ISTPs and INTPs, yeah, I think ISTPs will usually, they're probably one of the smarter types up there. They're probably gonna get themselves right most of the time. INTPs also very smart. I suppose they could misjudge their type and think they are, I don't know, maybe even something like an ENTJ, or maybe even a INTJ, but usually I think they get it right. ISFPs and INFPs. INFPs I think usually get their type correct, and ISFPs usually also, although you don't see as many of those interested in typology. You sometimes get them totally getting themselves upside down also, ENTJ or something like that. There is a common what would you say, old wives' tale? Is that offensive now? There's like a common myth in Myers-Briggs and the typology stuff online that most INFPs mistype themselves as INFJs, or most people who are INFJs are mistyped INFPs. I don't know where that idea came from. There's no like statistic that anyone can point to say that that is true. And from my experience and observation, that's like not true at all. Except for people who like really don't know anything about typology and are maybe just like taking a test. Yeah, it's easy to mistype as INFJ if you're just taking a test. But if people who kind of like learn some stuff, I don't think that it really happens with INFPs. Watch another video right here, or check out the whole darn playlist right here. Thanks to Geology for supporting this channel. And until next time, stay cool and attractive.